Welcome to Double Portion Inheritance with Maria Merola and Gary Wold, brought to you by DoublePortionInheritance.com. Since 1981, Maria heard the call of Yahuwah to become a watchman to the house of Yisrael and to those within the traditional Christian church. She was instructed to warn them against the false doctrines and pagan traditions of men. After 25 years of studying Scripture, the word of Yahuwah came to Maria again in 2007 as she was called out of the corporate world to become a full-time intercessor and prophetic teacher. The name of the ministry, Double Portion Inheritance, was given to her after she received the revelation of the two houses of Yisrael from Ezekiel 37:16. The mission of this ministry is to bring together the stick of Judah and the stick of Joseph for the return of the Messiah, Yahushua. And now, Maria Merola.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Today is July 23rd, 2022, and we're doing part 2 of a study we started last week called Except Those Days Should Be Shortened. And a lot of people are bewildered over our Messiah's words in Matthew 24:22, where he says, except those days should be shortened, no flesh would be saved. Now, some versions, some modern translations say no flesh should survive. But when you look up the Greek word for saved, it's sozo, and it means healed, saved, and delivered. So I think it's more talking about spiritual salvation. I mean, I'm sure it includes a physical salvation as well, but survived implies only a physical salvation. So now I just wanted to let you guys know, some of you might have missed part 1 from last week. We didn't have a chance, Gary didn't have a chance to edit it and put it up on YouTube. He's 3 podcasts behind. You know, he works a full-time job, so it's really difficult to make time in the evenings after his job to edit these shows. And what he does is he puts the music in, and he puts the intro music and the outro music and all of that, and edits out some of the unwanted noise like coughing, or sometimes somebody has a comment and maybe they have a dog in the background barking or something like that. So if you want to go back 3 weeks before and from July 4th, we've got Messiah seen in the tabernacle colors, the mystery of the Tekelet and the Tola, part 1. Now that has a part 2, but we haven't edited that one yet, and it's not up yet. So just to let you know, that one's coming. That's the next one that's coming after the next one we're going to be putting up. And then this one was from July 15th. The heavens declare the glory of Yahuwah. And then this one from last week, it's not up yet, but we will have it up hopefully this week. Okay. Except those days should be shortened. Okay. So I'm going to say a brief prayer. Father Yahuwah, we love you. We praise you and we worship you. Yahuwah, your name is holy. Your name is Kadosh. You are set apart. We thank you for the blood of Yahushua HaMashiach. We thank you that we can come boldly before your throne of grace to find mercy and help in time of need. We come before you, Father. Right now, we ask you to fill us to overflowing with your Ruach HaKodesh, your Holy Spirit. Pour out your Spirit on each and every person that is with us today, who is listening. Give us the spirit of wisdom and revelation, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and understanding, and the spirit of the fear of Yahuwah Elohim. Okay, so except those days should be shortened. Last week, we covered quite a few things, and I recommend you go back and read the blog. The blog link will be included with the YouTube video, and I posted the blog on Facebook, so you can go back and read the whole teaching. It is pretty deep, and so I recommend you go back and read the blog. And where we left off last week is we were at the part where, let's see where we were at here. King Solomon was testing these 2 harlots, and these 2 harlots lived together in the same house. Each of them had a baby boy, and one harlot, she accidentally killed her baby boy in the middle of the night. She accidentally smothered him. I guess she took him to bed to nurse him, and she smothered him and killed him by accident. So what she did was she swapped her dead baby with the other woman's living baby. And when they woke up, the woman that she stole the baby from went to King Solomon and said, "Hey, this woman stole my baby in the middle of the night. She's trying to pass off that baby as her own." And so King Solomon, to test these women to see who the true mother was, he said to one of his men, "Take a sword and slice the baby in half." Now, he wasn't really going to do it, but it was to see who the real mother was. The real mother was willing to let the other woman keep the baby rather than to see her baby be killed. Okay. And this is a metaphor for the two houses of Israel, because see, in Ezekiel chapter 23, Yahuwah calls both houses of Israel harlots. The word of Yahuwah came unto me, saying, "Son of man, there were two women, the daughters of one mother." Okay, the mother being Jerusalem. Remember in Galatians 4:26, Shaul, Paul the apostle, says Jerusalem is the mother of us all. So he calls Jerusalem the mother of us all. Also in Isaiah 66, Isaiah, the prophet Yeshayahu, Isaiah, calls Jerusalem our mother. And he says that we are to love Jerusalem. He says those who love Jerusalem, that they would be blessed. So Ezekiel's being shown two women, the daughters of one mother, which is Jerusalem, and they committed whoredoms in Egypt. They committed whoredoms in their youth. There were their breasts pressed, and there were they bruised the teats of their virginity. And the names of them were Aholah the elder and Aholabah her sister. So Ezekiel 23, and here we go. And Aholah, looking at that name, the first form is in form of feminine, but is in fact for the second form, her tent. So the meaning of Aholah is her tent. That is idolatrous sanctuary, a symbolic name for Samaria. This is where the Samaritans were from. See, the 10 northern tribes of the kingdom of Ephraim, their capital city was Samaria. So they were the older. And then Aholibah, her sister, Aholibah also means my tent is in her. Okay, a symbolic name for Judah. So you've got Aholah, which is Samaria, and you have Aholibah, which is symbolic name for Judah. Okay, and it says, "They were mine, and they bare sons and daughters. Thus were their names Samaria," which here it says Shamaron, which means watch station. Samaria is Aholah, and Jerusalem is Aholibah. Okay, and Aholah played the harlot when she was mine, and she doted on her lovers, on the Assyrians, her neighbors, which were clothed with blue. And that word blue is tekelet. We've talked about that in previous podcasts about the little creature, the sea creature that is harvested to dye the blue tzitzits that we are commanded to wear on the four corners of our garments, the four fringes. In Numbers 15, Yahuwah tells us to use tekelet. I recommend going and watching that video from 3 weeks ago called the Tabernacle Colors, Messiah Seen in the Tabernacle Colors, to get a better understanding of this. Okay, so it says they were clothed with blue, captains and rulers of them, desirable young men, horsemen, riding upon horses. Thus she committed her whoredoms with them, with all them that were chosen, men of Assyria, and with all on whom she doted, and with all their idols she defiled herself. Neither left she her whoredoms brought from Egypt, for in her they lay with her, and they bruised the breasts of her virginity, and poured their whoredom upon her. Wherefore I have delivered her into the hands of her lovers, into the hand of the Assyrians, and upon whom she doted. These discovered her nakedness, and they took her sons and her daughters and slew her with the sword, and she became famous among women, for they had executed judgment upon her. And when her sister Aholibah saw this, she was more corrupt. So this is the kingdom of Judah, the two southern tribes of Benjamin and Judah. And he's saying that she was more corrupt in her inordinate love than she in her whoredoms, more than her sister in her whoredoms. She doted upon the Assyrians, her neighbors, captains and rulers, clothed more gorgeously, horsemen riding upon horses, all of them desirable young men. Then I saw that she was defiled, that they took both one way, and that she increased her whoredoms. For when she saw men portrayed upon the wall, the images of the Chaldeans portrayed with vermilion. Vermilion is like a red color, red ochre color. Okay. Girded with girdles upon their loins, exceeding in dyed attire upon their heads, all of them princes to look to, after the manner of the Babylonians of Chaldea, the land of their nativity. And as soon as she saw them with her eyes, she doted upon them and sent messengers unto them into Chaldea. And the Babylonians came to her into the bed of love, and they defiled her with their whoredom, and she was polluted with them, and her mind was alienated from them. So she discovered her whoredoms and discovered her nakedness. Then my mind was alienated from her, like as my mind was alienated from her sister. So he's talking about the two kingdoms, the kingdom of Judah and the northern kingdom of Ephraim, which had 10 tribes, and the southern kingdom of Judah, which had 2 tribes, Benjamin and Judah. So it says she multiplied her whoredoms in calling to remembrance the days of her youth, wherein she had played the harlot in the land of Egypt. For she doted upon their paramours, and whose flesh is as the flesh of donkeys, and whose issue is like the issue of horses. Thus you called to remembrance the lewdness of your youth, in bruising your teats. That's talking about the breast, by the Egyptians, and for the paps of your youth. And so I'm not going to read further. I'm just going to kind of give you an idea who these two harlots represent in this account, where Solomon has these two harlots that he's testing, and he discovers who the real mother is. The real mother is the one who had the living baby, and she exclaimed, "No, don't kill my baby. Let her have the baby. Let the other woman have the baby." She was willing to let go of her child so as not to see the child cut in half. So the mother that killed her own baby accidentally is a prophetic picture of Judah, the kingdom of Judah, because they were the ones that shouted, "Crucify him." The baby represents the Messiah. The dead baby represents the crucified Messiah. The living baby represents the resurrected Messiah. Okay? And so we read in Ezekiel 23 that Aholibah, which represents Judah, was more wicked and corrupt than Aholah. And so this is the mother who accidentally killed her baby while he was sleeping, while she was, nursing him in the middle of the night. She fell asleep and smothered him to death. So this is the more wicked mother who's willing to, she didn't care if the baby got sliced in half, because you understand that in those days, women could not inherit a piece of land unless they had a male heir. So to her, it didn't matter if the baby was dead. All she cared about was her inheritance. All she cared about was her land. The other mother had compassion on her child and was willing to give him up so long as he remained alive. So this is the prophetic picture that we get from this account with Solomon. is when Messiah came, he was the, the child born to us. Isaiah 9:6 says, unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, right? And Judah, the kingdom of Judah, they were more corrupt. They were more wicked because they were willing to have him crucified by the Romans because they feared that they would lose the kingdom. And then, of course, the good news of Messiah went afterwards to the nations, to the heathen nations. So, this is why when our Messiah met with the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, uh, the Yahudim, the Jews, were shocked that he would even give this woman the time of day because, the Yahudim, the Jews, had no dealings with the Samaritans. They thought they were better than the Samaritans, but in fact, Scripture says they were actually more corrupt. But, the Samaritan woman, she's a prophetic type of the 10 northern tribes that were divorced. In Jeremiah chapter 3:8, Yahuwah divorced 10 out of 12 tribes and scattered them and sent them away to the nations. Whereas the two southern tribes of the kingdom of Judah, even though they were more corrupt, he didn't divorce them. And the reason being is because we know that our Messiah had to be born into the tribe of Judah. And if Yahuwah had divorced them, there would be no tribe for our Messiah to be born into. And, Jacob prophesied in Genesis 49:10, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes. So because of that, Yahuwah didn't divorce the kingdom of Yehuda. Even though they deserved it, he didn't divorce them. He had to leave a remnant so that there would be, something left to the kingdom. And so, here we have this story of these two harlots, and Solomon discovers who the true mother is. Now, the reason I went into all of this is because back in 2002, right after the events of 9/11, I was in a season of intense prayer seeking Yahuwah. I was asking him, what does all this mean? The events that happened, on 9/11, the Twin Towers. And then, of course, we know that the Pentagon was hit by a missile. My son was there. My son Elijah was there. He was working there. And he heard the loud boom. We drove past the Pentagon the next day. There was no plane wreckage. It wasn't an airplane. It was a missile. It was just a big black hole. And, we obviously could tell that there was no airplane there, no airplane wreckage. But the thing is that during this time when I was praying and seeking the Father and saying, is this the end of the world? And I became, even though I had already been born again for, 21 years at that point, I became even more fascinated with end time prophecy. I wanted to understand Daniel's 70th week. I wanted to understand the timing of the second coming of Messiah. So I began to seek him more fervently about this subject. And so when I looked into Daniel's 70th week, and I'm just going to just briefly go to my Facebook page. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I gave a brief synopsis, which I think is important for me to, at this point, share with you. Basically, I said one of the most profound revelations ever given to me in 2002. Actually, let me look it up in this other place. I have another group where I have it in larger print, so it can be more visible here. I said one of the most profound revelations ever given to me in 2002 after the events of 9/11, 2001 was concerning Daniel's 70th week. Most people are caught between two paradigms. Number one, first paradigm is people say, some people are of the belief that our Messiah completed the last 7 years of the 490 years of Daniel's prophecy with no further prophecy needing to be fulfilled in the future for Israel and Jerusalem. Number 2, our Messiah completed none of the 7 years of the 490 years of Daniel's prophecy, leaving 7 years for the great tribulation in the future. So these are the two paradigms, right? And actually, there's a name for these. This one is called preterism. Preterism, a lot of Seventh-day Adventists adhere to this. They say that, all of prophecy, dealing with Daniel's 70 weeks is all in the past. There's no need there's no further, future fulfillment. And then, so they call that preterism. And then there's this view, which is called futurism. Okay. And with this view, they teach that there's a 7-year tribulation, and that some people believe that, that the church is going to be raptured out of here before the 7-year tribulation begins. Some people believe in mid-trib. They believe like at the halfway mark, after 3.5 years, the church will be raptured, leaving behind, the non-believers. Okay. But what if I told you that neither of these two views are correct? Neither of these paradigms is correct. What if I told you that the answer lies squarely in the middle, as is often the case? And what if I could show you in the scriptures that our Messiah died in the midst of the week, within the week, within the week? Now, I know that sounds a little, off the wall, but just bear with me. So in this blog that I wrote called Who Confirms the Covenant of Daniel's 70th Week, I show that our Messiah died in the middle of the literal week, which was Passover week, what we today would call Wednesday. He didn't die on Good Friday. That is a Roman Catholic myth. I talk about that in one of my other YouTube videos. But he died on the 4th day of the week, what we would call Wednesday. He was in the heart of the earth for 3 full days and 3 full nights. And he didn't resurrect on Sunday morning. He resurrected on Saturday evening, what is the Sabbath, what we would call the Sabbath, just before the sun went down. Now, the next day, the women did go back to the tomb on Sunday morning, and his body was gone. But that's just when they discovered that he was gone. But he was already gone the night before, and the angel told them that. Okay. He also died in the middle of the 7,000 years, because you have to understand that from creation until the Messiah returns is going to be 6,000 years. By the end of the millennium, the millennial reign of Messiah will be completed. 7,000 years will be completed by that point. So he died in the middle of the 7,000 years. In other words, it was in the 4th millennium. Okay. But he also died in the middle of the last 7 years of the 490-year prophecy, which means that after 3.5 years of ministry, he died. So he got cut off in the middle of the week. Now, proof of this, of his 3.5-year ministry, can be found in Luke chapter 4, where he began his ministry on Yom Kippur in 27 AD, immediately following his 40-day fast in the wilderness. Now, how do I know that his ministry began in 27 AD? Well, Josephus, who was a Jewish historian, had written in his Antiquities that the year 23 BC was a Jubilee year. Okay, every 50th year is a Jubilee. Now, all we have to do is count 50 years forward from 23 BC, and we land on 27 AD. So we know when he began his ministry. It was 27 AD, and it was a Jubilee. Okay, so first he entered into the synagogue and read only half of Yeshayahu, Isaiah 61, verse 2. By reading this passage of scripture, he was declaring himself as the awaited Mashiach, the Messiah. Because what did he say? He said, the Spirit of Yahuwah is upon me, for he has anointed me. Well, guess what? The word Messiah, Mashiach, in Hebrew means the anointed one. So for him to say, the Spirit of Yahuwah is upon me, for he has anointed me, he's basically telling them, I'm the one you've been waiting for. I'm the anointed one. I'm the Messiah. Okay. And also, he was manifesting himself as the high priest Melchizedek, which is, in English, Melchizedek, who qualified to preach the acceptable year of Yahuwah. You see, only the high priest was qualified to preach the acceptable year. In Numbers chapter 10, Aaron and his sons were told in every Jubilee year that they were to blow 2 silver trumpets to announce the Jubilee, and it was called an acceptable year. It's when everybody's debts were canceled. Anybody who had lost their land because they went into debt and they couldn't afford to keep their land and they had to sell it off to pay off their debts, they would have the opportunity to buy back their land. So the fact that he was preaching the acceptable year is astounding, because he wasn't from the tribe of Levi. He was not of the sons of Aaron. He's of the tribe of Judah, Yehudah. So you can imagine what these people were thinking, that he's preaching the acceptable year of Yahuwah, but he's not from the sons of Aaron and he's not from the tribe of Levi. So they're probably thinking, how's he able to do this? Well, in Hebrews chapter 7, go with me there real quick. Hebrews 7:14. We're going to read it. It says, for it is evident that our master sprang out of Yehudah, of which tribe Moshe spoke nothing concerning priesthood. And see, this whole chapter is talking about Melchizedek. He is without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of Elohim, abides a priest continually. Okay. Now, some of you might be saying, well, wait a minute. I thought he had a heavenly father. He did. I thought he had an earthly father, Joseph. He did. The whole point of this verse is that in eternity, he has an eternal existence. Before he came to earth and put on human flesh, he was without end. He's the beginning and the ending. We read in the book of Revelation, in the English translation, he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. But in Hebrew, it's the Aleph and the Taw. Okay, the Aleph and the Taw. He's the first and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The point being is, even though he came to earth as a human, finite being, he also had a pre-incarnate existence in eternity, that he was without father. Why? Because he actually is the Father. You see, the Father is the Son. The Son came to earth. Yahuwah came to earth and put on the finite human body and portrayed for us the role of the Son. But you see, it was Yahuwah all along. So it says he's without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. In other words, he's eternal. He abides as a priest forever. Psalms 110 tells us this. Okay. Isaiah 9:6 tells us that unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. And it says he shall be called the everlasting Father. Okay, so right here we're told that a child is born to us, a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty El, the Everlasting Father. So the Father and the Son are really the one and the same being, Yahuwah. Okay, now, people can't wrap their brains around that. They think that's crazy. Okay, but see, Yahuwah is omnipresent. That means he can be in all places at once. He could be on the throne in heaven as the Father, and he could still be down here on earth as the finite human being, as the Son. He could be in both places at once. You see, he can exist in all time continuums. He can exist in the past, the present, and the future, all at the same time. That's why he says, I am the one who is, and who was, and who is to come. He is Elohim. He is able to bypass all the human limitations that we have.
Including multitasking. He's not a multitasker. He's an omnitasker.
Right. So here's Yahushua in the synagogue preaching the acceptable year of Yahuwah, which only the sons of Aaron were, only the high priest after the sons of Aaron were supposed to do. But he's from the tribe of Judah, and he's preaching the acceptable year. What was he doing? He was letting them know, the temporary priesthood of the sons of Aaron, that's gone now. I'm here as your high priest. Okay, this is why John the Baptist, his cousin, had to die. John was of the sons of Aaron. He was a Levite. Okay, now the Levites themselves are not done away with, but only the role of the high priest after the sons of Aaron, that was replaced. Now Melchizedek stepped back into his role as high priest. Remember, he met with Abraham after Abraham slaughtered the kings, and he blessed Abraham with wine, with bread and wine. Well, what does it say in Hebrews chapter 7? Okay, because everybody says, oh, well, Melchizedek isn't a person. Melchizedek is an order. Well, it is an order, but look what it says in Hebrews 7:4. Now consider how great this man was. It doesn't say now consider how great this order was. Who was this man? It was obviously the one who met with Abraham. It says, now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave the 10th of the spoils. Okay, that's a tithe. The Old English word for 10th is tithe. Okay, so this is talking about Messiah, obviously. Okay, obviously this is referring to Yahushua. Okay, so he's declaring the acceptable year, and the language that he's using in Isaiah 61 is language that is used in a Jubilee year. This tells us he's beginning his ministry in a Jubilee year, and it's on Yom Kippur. But he did something that is very revealing. He read only half of Isaiah 61:2, only half of the verse. And then what did he do? He stopped dead center in the middle of the verse. Okay, what did he read? Isaiah 61:2 says, to proclaim the acceptable year of Yahuwah. And then what does he do? He closes the scroll. Now, the King James Version says it was a book, but I believe it was a scroll. That's what they did in temple times. They had scrolls. And he gave it back to the scribe, the temple scribe. Now, why did he read only half of the verse? Well, it is because the latter half of the verse is reserved for another future Yom Kippur, okay, when he comes back to take vengeance on his enemies and the enemies of his bride. So the other half of the verse, Yeshayahu, Isaiah 61:2 says, and the day of vengeance of our Elohim to comfort all that mourn. The latter half of Isaiah 61:2 is describing his second coming in Revelation 19:2. In fact, in Revelation 19:2, he even uses the word avenge, which is a verb describing taking vengeance. See, this word avenge comes from a Latin word, and within this word vengeance is the root word avenge. Okay? Not only does our Messiah read half of Isaiah 61:2, serving as proof that he was dividing Daniel's 70th week in half, but he was also comparing his ministry to that of the prophet Eliyahu or Elijah when he stated that Elijah's ministry was 3.5 years. And here's what he says. Right after he finishes reading the Isaiah 61 scriptures there, it says, "But I tell you of a truth, many widows were in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, when great famine was throughout all the land." Oh boy, that sounds like today. We're getting ready to come up on a famine. Okay? So we're getting ready to come up on the next 3.5 years. Pretty soon the Great Tribulation's going to be here. Now, why would our Messiah make a point of telling us that the prophet Eliyahu's ministry lasted for 3.5 years? In other words, half of 7 years. Well, right after he read half of Isaiah 61:2, he tells us that Elijah's ministry was half of 7 years. You getting the picture yet? Okay. Now, as a side note, on August 13th, 2020, the Abraham Accords were agreed upon and they were announced by President Donald Trump. Now, by contrary to popular belief, this is not the covenant with many that is described in Daniel 9:27. Daniel 9:27. I remember when this happened, people all over social media were saying, "Oh, this is the covenant with many." No. I'm going to show you this is not the same thing. As a matter of fact, President Trump was fulfilling the role of the little horn in Daniel chapters 7 and 8. The Abraham Accords are not the same thing as what was spoken of in Daniel 9:27. What took place with the Abraham Accords is a fulfillment of Isaiah 28:15 through 18, which is called the covenant with death. Okay, now I'm not going to go down that rabbit trail this week because I don't want to deviate. I don't want to digress from what we're talking about today, but this other blog I have called The Four Notable Horns of Daniel, I recommend that you read it so you can get a better understanding of what the Abraham Accords were all about. Daniel 9:25 through 27 is describing the real Messiah, Yahushua, who confirmed the Abrahamic covenant with many for 1 week. And in the middle of that week, he was cut off. You see, by allowing his ministry to be cut in half, he repaired the breach and he stood in the gap for both houses of Israel. Okay. And the other half of the 7 years will be completed when he finishes the week through his 2 witnesses. See, the 2 witnesses are going to pick up where he left off, and they're going to finish the latter half of the week, the last 3.5 years. You see, our Messiah's ministry lasted for 3.5 years, followed by a 2,000-year gap called the fullness of the Gentiles. Now, Jacob, when he prophesied over his grandson Ephraim, he said to Ephraim, he said that he would become a multitude of nations. Now, in Hebrew, that phrase, multitude of nations, is melo hagoyim, and it literally means the fullness of the Gentiles. So when the Apostle Paul, Shaul, said this in Romans 11:25, he talked about the fullness of the Gentiles. He was referencing Jacob's prophecy over his grandson Ephraim. The fullness of the Gentiles is translated in Genesis 48:19 as the multitude of nations, but more literally in Hebrew, it means the fullness of the Gentiles. Now, during these past 2,000 years, the Gentiles have been provoking Israel to jealousy. That's the whole entire reason why there's been this 2,000-year gap. Yahuwah has been giving Israel a chance to recognize the mistake they made, okay, when they crucified their own Messiah. The 2 witnesses in Zechariah chapter 4 and also in Revelation 11 will also have a ministry that lasts for 1,260 days or 3.5 years. These 2 halves of the week represent divided Israel. You see, because Israel has broken their covenant with Yahuwah, their kingdom has been divided. Therefore, Yahushua allowed his ministry to be divided in half so that he could stand in the gap. Remember Ezekiel 22:30, Ezekiel asked, is there a man who can stand in the gap? Well, we know that that man, the only one who could stand in the gap, was our Messiah. And it says, and thereby he repaired the breach. In Isaiah 58:12, we read about the repairers of the breach. It says that we shall be called repairers of the breach. Why? Because we are going to function together with Messiah. We're going to be his kings and priests in the new millennium, and we are going to help him repair the breach between the two divided houses. So I recommend you go back later and read this blog called Who Confirms the Covenant of Daniel's 70th Week, which goes right along with this teaching I'm talking about today called Except Those Days Should Be Shortened. So I shared all of this because I wanted you to have some background information about these two harlots and what their significance is. So back in 2002, I was asking the Father about the 7-year tribulation, and I began to realize as I'm reading Daniel 9:27, go with me there, Daniel chapter 9. Let's go with me, Daniel chapter 9. As I was reading it, right here in Daniel, let me start with verse 26. And it says, and after 62 weeks, that's 62 weeks, and those are actually weeks of years. So that would be 62 times 7, okay? 434 years to be exact. This is right after Israel comes back to the land, comes back to Jerusalem after the Jews came out of the Babylonian captivity. They were allowed to go back and rebuild their city and their temple and their walls in the days of Nehemiah the prophet. And it says, and after 62 weeks, which is 434 years, shall Messiah be cut off. Okay, this is talking about the real Messiah, not the Antichrist, but not for himself. And it says, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Now that's referring to the Roman army of General Titus, which happened in 70 AD, 40 years later, after our Messiah was crucified. The Romans came in and destroyed Jerusalem. Now, he gave them a 40-year probationary period. He let them have 40 years to recognize their error, to repent. But after 40 years, they still didn't repent. See, 40 is the number of testing. We see that over and over again in Scripture. Noah's ark, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. The children of Israel wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Moses went up to Mount Sinai for 40 days to get the tablets. Messiah fasted in the wilderness for 40 days. It's all over the place. He gave them 40 years and they didn't repent. And when they didn't, the Romans came and destroyed everything. And it says, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. Now, this next verse has tripped so many people up because it says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Now, when you read this, you're thinking, who is the he? Because if you understand English grammar, the he can't be talking about the people. The people are not a he, they're a they. Okay? But some people try to apply this he to the prince. Okay? But see, the prince is not the subject in Daniel 9:26. The prince is describing who the people belong to. So the subject, there's 2 subjects here. Messiah is one subject, and then there's the people. Okay? The of the prince part is not the subject. The of the prince is the adjective describing who the people are. So it's not a subject. The he in Daniel 9:27 has to be referring to one of these 2 subjects, Messiah or the people. Okay? Can't be referring to the prince, because the prince, it would be, Rome. Nero Caesar, he was already dead by this point, but General Titus. Okay, so the he can't be talking about the prince, because the people that belong to the prince would not be referred to as a he. They would be referred to as a they. Okay, so he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. But see, so many Christian theologians teach that the he is some future antichrist who's going to confirm a peace treaty. They say that some future antichrist is going to confirm some peace treaty with many for 1 week, or in other words, for 7 years. Okay, because the Hebrew word here for week is Shabua, which can mean a sabbatical, 7-year sabbatical. It can mean a literal week as well. It can mean a literal week, but can also mean a week of years. Okay, 7 years. So they think it means that some future antichrist will come and confirm a peace treaty. And in the middle of that week, in the middle of the 7 years, that he will break his peace treaty, and he will cause the sacrificing, the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Now we know that this anti-Messiah leader will take away the daily sacrifices. It says this in Daniel chapter 8. It says it in Daniel chapter 11. And it says it again in Daniel chapter 12, that the false Messiah will take away the daily sacrifices. We know this. And we know that he's going to set up the abomination that causes Jerusalem to become desolate. So this is true. But in this verse, this is talking about the real Messiah who confirms the covenant. Well, what covenant is it referring to? Okay, the Hebrew word there for confirm is gabar. It means to strengthen. It means to confirm. Okay, but the word covenant is berit. It's number 1285. And guess what this word means? Let's look at the meaning. It says a compact made by passing between pieces of flesh. Now, there's a rule of interpretation. It's called the law of first mention. The first time a concept is presented to us in Scripture, that sets a precedence, so that moving forward, when we see the same concept presented again, we can know that it has the same meaning again. So who else can you remember, where else in Scripture that somebody passed between pieces of flesh? Of course, that was the Abrahamic covenant. It's when Yahuwah told Abraham to divide the animal pieces, and Yahuwah passed between those two divided animal pieces with a burning lamp and a smoking furnace. Now, why did Yahuwah do that? Because Yahuwah told Abraham that his descendants would be more numerous than the stars of the heavens and more numerous than the sands on the seashore. But he did let Abraham know that at one point his descendants would be taken captive into Egypt for 430 years. Now, Yahuwah knew that Israel would become a nation united under King David. However, after King Solomon died, after David's son Solomon died, the two kingdoms would split and become two divided nations, two houses of Israel. And because of that, Yahuwah, having this foreknowledge, divided these animal pieces, or told Abraham to divide the pieces. And what did he do? He walked between those divided animal pieces. Why? He was standing in the gap. He was standing in the gap for the future Israel that was going to become divided. He knew they were going to be divided. So he passed between those divided animal pieces, stood in the gap. Okay. Now, so this is obviously talking about the Abrahamic covenant and Messiah Yahushua. The night before he died, it says in the gospel, he lifted up the cup and he said, "This is the blood of my covenant, shed for many." And what does it say here? He shall confirm the covenant with many. Okay. Now, I don't read anything in scripture about some future antichrist confirming the Abrahamic covenant. Of course, Donald Trump tried to do that, but he didn't, he didn't get crucified, or he didn't pass between pieces of flesh. So I don't see any future antichrist or anti-Messiah passing between pieces of flesh. I don't see any future anti-Messiah being circumcised or cut or bleeding for us, So this has to be talking about the Messiah Yahushua, who confirmed the Abrahamic covenant with many for 1 week. Not only was it a 7-day, Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread lasts for 7 days. He died in the middle of that week, which was the 4th day of the week, what we would call Wednesday. But in the middle of the week, not only was it in the middle of the literal Passover week, okay, on the 4th day of the week, but it was also in the middle of Daniel's 70th week. You see, this prophecy in Daniel lasts for 490 years. He says it right here. 70 weeks are determined upon your people. Okay, 70 times 7. 70 times 7 is 49, but this is talking about 70 weeks of years. So 70 times 7 years is 490 years. So the entire length of this prophecy is 490 years. The last 7 years out of the 490, that was when he died, in the middle of that last 7 years. In other words, after 3.5 years. Now there's only 3.5 years left to go. There's not a 7-year tribulation. No such thing. Doesn't exist. You can search the whole Bible and you won't find it. No such thing as a 7-year tribulation. And it says, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Now, it's true. The false Messiah is going to put an end to the daily sacrifice. But in this instance, it was our Messiah who caused the sacrifice and oblation to cease. Now, they continued to perform those animal sacrifices for 40 more years until the Romans came and destroyed the temple. But there's something called the Yom Kippur miracle, which is documented in the Jewish Talmud. It says that for 40 consecutive years, from 30 AD until 70 AD, every year when the high priests would try to perform the Yom Kippur sacrifice, the red ribbon that they tied around the horn of the scapegoat was supposed to turn white. It was red, but it was supposed to turn white. If the nation was forgiven, the red ribbon would turn white. Well, those for 40 consecutive years, it didn't turn white. Not only that, they would cast lots to see whether the black stone came up. If the black stone came up, it means the nation wasn't forgiven. But if the white stone came up, it meant that they were forgiven as a nation. Well, for 40 consecutive years, the black stone came up every single year. Not only that, but the temple doors kept blowing themselves open by themselves, causing the fire to go out on the altar, on the brazen altar. And it says in the Torah, you're not supposed to allow the fire to go out on the altar. And this kept happening, and they knew, the priests, the rabbis, they knew that the nation was under judgment. But you would think they would put 2 and 2 together and say, oh, it's because we crucified our Messiah. This is why we're being judged. They never put 2 and 2 together. And when that 40-year probationary period was up, he gave them 40 years to repent for what they had done. And when they didn't, Rome came and destroyed. So it was Messiah who caused the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. In other words, because they rejected his sacrifice as the red heifer, because see, the red heifer sanctifies the altar. The red heifer is what is used to cleanse the altar whenever they were defiled for shedding innocent blood as a nation. The priests would kill a red heifer, and they would sanctify the altar with the ashes of a red heifer. Well, not only was he portraying the role of the Passover lamb, he also portrayed the role of the red heifer, because the red heifer is the only sacrifice that is escorted away from the city limits of Jerusalem, escorted outside the camp and to the base of the Mount of Olives. Well, that's where our Messiah was escorted. He was escorted. The place of the skull was at the base of the Mount of Olives. It's exactly the same place where Abraham offered up his son Isaac. The same exact place where Abraham offered up his son Isaac. But a ram was found as a substitute offering for Isaac. That's the same place where our Messiah was crucified. See, he was portraying the role of the red heifer, which had to be 3 years old, at least three, at the most 3.5 years old. Okay. And so for the overspreading of abominations, it says he shall make it desolate. Now, we know that the false Messiah, the anti-Messiah, will set up an abominable image in the temple, and he will cause the Jerusalem to become desolate. But who's the one that spoke the word over Jerusalem? Remember when our Messiah cursed the fig tree and he said, bear no more fruit? He's talking about Jerusalem, right? But then what does he say? He said, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who stone all the prophets that are sent unto you. How many times would I have wanted to gather you as a mother hen gathers her chickens, but you would not come to me. And then he says, behold, your house is left unto you desolate. So you see, Yahushua, it was by his spoken word that he prophesied that they would become desolate. So when the Romans came 40 years later and made them desolate, yes, Rome was the one that made them desolate. Yes, the future Antichrist will make Jerusalem desolate. But who's the one that decreed it by his spoken word? It was our Messiah who decreed it by his spoken word. So you see, he's the one that confirmed the Abrahamic covenant with many for one literal week, Passover week, but it was also for that 7 years. And in the midst of that week, in the middle of that literal Passover week, which happened to be on the 4th day of the week, what we today would call Wednesday, that's when he was cut off, and was also in the middle of the 7 years. In other words, after 3.5 years. And he caused the sacrifice and oblation to no longer be recognized in heaven by the Father. Even though they performed them for 40 more years, the Father did not accept those sacrifices because the altar was defiled with innocent blood. And he was the red heifer. He portrayed the picture of the red heifer, and because they rejected him, therefore their altar remained defiled. And it was him, Yahushua, who made Jerusalem desolate. And it says that they would continue to be desolate right up until the end. It says that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate, even until the consummation. Well, that word consummation means the completion. Right up until the very end, Jerusalem is going to be made desolate because history is going to repeat itself. It's going to happen all over again. Okay. So back to the teaching about, except those days should be shortened. Okay. So the harlot with, that had the living child, she represents the redeemed Gentiles who accepted his resurrection and thus his gospel. Okay. King Solomon almost divided that baby boy. He was showing who the true mother was when he did this. The point of this story is to illustrate that both houses of Israel have been fighting over the land of their inheritance ever since then. Now, back in 2002, when I was asking the Father, I said, who is the he in Daniel 9:27? Because it can be confusing. Theologians have been telling us the he in Daniel 9:27 is some future antichrist. But when I read it, it didn't make sense. I'm like, How can it be referring to an antichrist when this is talking about, in the previous verse, it's talking about the people, which is a they, and then it's talking about the Messiah, which is a he, okay? And so I believed very strongly this was talking about the real Messiah, okay? But when I was asking the Father for confirmation, I said, Father, was that you? Was that Yahushua who confirmed the covenant? Was it that his ministry was divided in half? And when I asked him the question, this is what he said to me. And it stunned me. It absolutely stunned me. He said, the Ruach HaKodesh asked me the question, why was Solomon ready to cut that baby in half? As soon as he said that, I knew that the baby represented Messiah. The living baby represented the Messiah, and that the baby almost being cut in half is indicative that our Messiah's ministry was cut in half. Okay? And the sword represents the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Elohim. Okay? So this was what I needed, the confirmation I needed that I was on the right track about Daniel's 70th week being cut in half, but I wanted to be 100% sure. And when he told me, he said, why was Solomon about to cut that baby in half? I knew. I was like, that's it. That's all I needed. Okay. So this was a pivotal point for me. Okay. Now, neither of these harlots qualified to inherit the land unless they had a male heir. That male heir is none other than Yahushua HaMashiach. Without a male heir, neither of them could inherit the land that was promised to Abraham and his descendants. The land can only be restored to them if they give birth to a man-child. Now, this also happened to Naomi when her daughter-in-law Ruth married Boaz from the house of Judah. And, Boaz, he was a close relative of Naomi. And Naomi's husband died. So, there is something called the Levirate marriage. It's called the law of the kinsman redeemer. It's when a woman's husband dies and she has no son. Either her son dies or she didn't ever bear a son to her dead husband. The close relative of that husband can impregnate the woman and give her a son. But the son will belong to the dead husband, not to the close relative. Okay? So Boaz, now Naomi was too old to give birth, but Ruth, who was her daughter-in-law, she crossed over. See, she was a Moabite. She was a Gentile. And what does it say in the Torah? It says, no Moabite may enter the congregation of Israel forever. But here's Ruth able to enter the congregation of Israel. How was that possible? Well, we are told in 1 Corinthians that if any man is in Messiah, behold, he is a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. You see, it's the same metaphor we see with a butterfly that goes into the cocoon and dies to its old nature. Actually, it's a caterpillar, not a butterfly, excuse me. So the caterpillar goes into the chrysalis and it metamorphosizes into a different creature. It undergoes a metamorphosis. It changes. It transforms from a caterpillar to a butterfly. This is what Ruth did. She took hold of her mother-in-law, Naomi, and said, my El shall be your El. Or no, I'm saying that backwards. Excuse me. Your El shall be my El. Your people shall be my people. Okay. So this was her definitive moment where she took a hold of her mother-in-law, Naomi, and she crossed over. She became a Yahudi, a Jew at that point. How do we know? Because In Ezekiel 47, it tells us this. If you go with me to Ezekiel 47:22, it tells us this. It says right here, Ezekiel 47:22, it says, and it shall come to pass that you divide the land, it says, by lot for an inheritance unto you and to the strangers that sojourn among you, which shall beget children among you, and they shall be unto you as born in the country among the children of Israel. They shall have an inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel. And it shall come to pass that in what tribe the stranger sojourns, there shall you give him his inheritance, says Yahuwah Elohim. So what this means is Ruth sojourned from Moab back to Bethlehem, Judah, with her mother-in-law Naomi, and because she sojourned with somebody from the tribe of Judah, she got to inherit land in the tribe of Judah. And not only that, she became a Yahudi, a Jew, because she sojourned with a Yahudi, a Jew. See that? So Ruth, although she was a Moabite, although she was a Gentile, she was able to cross over and become a Yahudi, a Jew. She didn't have to go to the synagogue and get, go through a bat mitzvah or a bar mitzvah or any of these, rabbinical things. Just by the confession of her mouth, she became a Yahudi, a Jew. So Naomi was too old to bear children. When Boaz and Ruth were married, they gave birth to a son, and the child became the heir. Their son, Obed, would become the progenitor of the future Messiah. Okay? And it will be the anti-Messiah, the false Messiah, who's going to rebuild Solomon's temple and thus attempt once again to divide Israel. Now, this already has begun to take place since August 13th, 2020, the Abraham Accords of President Donald Trump. And see, Trump is a type of corrupted King Solomon who divided Israel. King Solomon divided Israel. He collected 666 talents of gold in 1 year. So there is precedence for 666 in the Old Testament and the Tanakh. Okay. And, King Solomon made treaties and marriages with many heathen nations. President Trump did the same thing, making treaties with different nations. In other words, just like Solomon, who built heathen temples for his many wives, I believe President Trump is also working in tandem with Pope Francis to bring about a one world religion and a one world government for the end time beast. Okay. Now, there are some very interesting parallels between Donald Trump and King Solomon. President Trump's family claims to be from the Merovingian Jewish bloodline, and the Zionists they have asked President Trump to rebuild Solomon's temple. Right after he became president in 2016, the Jerusalem Post claimed that they were asking him to build the temple. Okay. They even placed his image on the temple shekel. Now, why would they place his image on the temple shekel unless he is going to be a repeat of Antiochus Epiphanes, who, defiled the temple with an image of Zeus, and they put his face, his image on the temple coin. Okay. See, history is repeating itself. Okay. And King Solomon also formed an alliance with the Arabs, just as Trump entered into the Abraham Accords with the United Arab Emirates. You see that? King Solomon formed an alliance with the Arabs. And now Trump entered into the Abraham Accords with the United Arab Emirates and Israel and Bahrain, 3 kingdoms. Now, this is from August 29th, 2019. This was from the Jerusalem Post. They're calling him the Messiah, the King Messiah Trump. Okay. Believe me, he's coming back. I believe he is coming back, and we are going to see a different Trump. than what we saw in other term that he served as president. See, Solomon accepted 666 talents of gold from the kings of Arabia. It says right here in 1 Kings 10:14 through 15. The weight of gold which Solomon received every year was 666 talents of gold, besides what came from the tradesmen, from the traffic of the merchants, and from all the kings of Arabia and the governors of the regions. Now I'm quoting out of the Jewish Study Bible because I wanted it to be read more clearly. But the King James Version says, now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Of course, that's 666. Then in verse 15, it says, beside that, he had of the merchantmen and of the traffic of the spice merchants and of all the kings of Arabia and the governors of the country. Okay, now I've got other blogs that you can read that give more details about Trump. Daniel's little horn fulfilled in President Trump. Is President Trump a globalist? Is President Trump the Antichrist? The 4 notable horns of Daniel. Is the beast and his mark already here? So I recommend you go back and read those later if you want to understand more about what Trump's role is, okay? The first 7 years of Jacob's work was for Leah, okay? Then the second 7-year period of Jacob's work was for Rachel. These 14 years were for the whole house of Israel. Therefore, the tribulation of our Messiah, you see, his 7 years of working for both houses was divided in half, okay? See, because I used to ask the Father all the time. I used to say, now, what doesn't make sense to me is that Jacob worked 2 periods of 7 years back to back. Joseph in Egypt worked for the Pharaoh for 2 periods of 7 years back to back. So why didn't our Messiah have a ministry that lasted for 14 years? In my mind, it made sense that his ministry should have been 14 years in keeping with the pattern of Jacob and Joseph, right? Well, I didn't understand back then, but the house has been divided, okay? And that's why his ministry was only 3.5 years. You see, our Messiah was cut off in the midst of the week, or the last 7 years of the 490-year prophecy of Daniel's 70th week. But he was also cut off in the middle of the literal Passover week, which was the 4th day of the week, what we would today call Wednesday. It is because Israel was a kingdom that had been divided. See, in order to stand in the gap, which comes from Ezekiel 22:30, and in order to repair the breach, which comes from Isaiah 51:12, he had to allow his own ministry to be divided in half. And that's the reason he was crucified between 2 thieves. We talked about that last week. Let me see. Yeah, see, why do you think he was crucified between 2 thieves? Who do you think these thieves represent? One of them, the one that said, Master, remember me when you come into your kingdom. What did he say to him? He said, this day you will be with me in paradise. The other guy who has this scowl on his face, this is an artist's depiction, he was cursing him. So that represents the kingdom of Judah. They were the ones that shouted, crucify him. So he represents the kingdom of Judah. This guy represents the 10 northern tribes of the kingdom of Ephraim. See, he was crucified between the 2 thieves, standing in the gap. He stood in the gap, okay? Dying in the middle of the 2. I talked about that last week. Now, at his first coming, our Messiah intended to marry his own people, the kingdom of Judah. It says right here in Yehukanan or John 1:11, it says he came unto his own, and his own received him not. See, this is just like Jacob. Jacob thought he was getting married to Rachel, but the night of his wedding, he finds out because, they covered the women's face with a veil. He didn't know he was getting married to her older sister. So just like Jacob was disappointed, Yahushua was disappointed. He was hoping to get the people of his own country, those from the kingdom of Judah. But instead, he ended up having to marry the Gentiles. And that's when the gospel was preached to all the different nations. So just like Jacob, who married Laban's oldest daughter, Leah, okay, Yahushua married those in the Gentile nations when they became born again believers and they began accepting the gospel. So hence Leah represents the born again Gentiles who accepted the good news of Messiah. Leah typifies those from the assembly of Philadelphia because they are called the first fruits. They are the first fruits of Messiah's resurrection. Okay. You can read about that in Romans 8:23 and Revelation 14:4. Because the kingdom of Yehuda or Judah rejected the good news of Messiah, the message went to the Gentiles and the nations. In other words, Ephraim, Joseph's youngest son, he was told he would become a multitude of nations. And so Ephraim, he's a prophetic picture of the Gentiles. And Leah, she was more fruitful. She had more children. She was more abundant. Yahuwah blessed her with more children because Jacob didn't love her the way he loved Rachel. So to compensate her for the fact that she wasn't loved, he gave her more children. And this is, the name Ephraim means double fruit. Double fruit. Leah was also doubly fruitful, more fruitful than her sister Rachel. Okay. Now, at his second coming, our Messiah will once again have a chance to marry the remnant from the house of Yehuda or Judah. They represent Rachel. You see, Rachel got married last. Leah got married first. Thus, Rachel also represents the assembly of Smyrna because why? The congregation at Philadelphia has the open door that no man can shut. They're going to get taken up to heaven, in the harpazo. It's not a pre-tribulation rapture. It's a post-tribulation. It's after the ministry of the two witnesses is finished. They're going to be caught up to heaven, it says, and to the throne. We are told in Revelation 12:5 that the man-child, the woman, which is Jerusalem, the mother of us all, she gives birth to a man-child. Well, that man-child is the resurrected two witnesses, the one new man. Remember in Ephesians 2:15, the apostle Paul calls both redeemed Jews and redeemed Gentiles, he calls them one new man. So when Jerusalem gives birth to the man-child, that's the one new man. That's the resurrected two witnesses. And so when they are caught up to heaven, it says in Revelation 12:5 that a man-child is caught up to the throne and to Elohim, to his throne. So that's what we often hear deemed as the rapture, but of course that's a Latin word. The word rapturo is a Latin word which has the exact same meaning as the Greek word harpazo. It says we shall all be caught up to meet him in the air. In 1 Thessalonians 4:17, that word caught up is the Greek word harpazo, and it means to seize, to snatch, to carry away, to take by force, to take into marriage. And that word is the same word in Latin is rapturo. Now, people always say, oh, that word's not in the Bible. Yes, it's not in the English Bible. That is true. But, my parents come from Italy. And when I was growing up, they had an Italian Bible. And I remember reading in 1 Thessalonians 4:17, where it says that we shall be caught up to meet Yahuwah in the air. And it says rapturo. So, yes, the concept is there. It's there. The word's not there in our English Bible, but the concept is there. The Greek word is harpazo. It's even in the Hebrew Tanakh. When Elijah was taken up in a chariot of fire, that Hebrew word is lahach. It's a weird word. It's lahach. It means to be caught up, to be taken, to be seized, to seize, to snatch, to carry away. So the concept is there. Okay. And the ones that represent Rachel are the assembly of Smyrna. They are told they're going to have to suffer tribulation for another 10 days. After Philadelphia is taken on the Feast of Trumpets, then Smyrna is left behind. They're going to have to suffer 10 days. Revelation 2:10 tells us they'll have to suffer 10 days. That's 10 days of awe. The 10 days leading up to Yom Kippur. Okay. And so Rachel represents the kingdom of Judah because, see, her body was buried in Ephrat, which is another name for Bethlehem, Judah. We know this because remember, King Herod killed all those baby boys in the kingdom of Judah, and that prophecy of Jeremiah was repeated there in the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew 2:18. It says, Rachel weeping for her children because they were not. That comes from Jeremiah 31:15 and also Matthew 2:18. So the fact that Rachel is being mentioned there as weeping for her children when all the baby boys from the kingdom of Judah were killed by Herod, that's an indicator that Rachel is symbolic of the kingdom of Judah. Even though she was not the mother of Judah, Leah was the mother of Judah. But you see, Rachel typifies the Yahudim, the Jews. They are going to get married to the Messiah last. They're going to meet him at the Mount of Olives. It says in Zechariah 12:10, they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and they shall be in bitterness as one is in bitterness for his only son. So Rachel typifies the kingdom of Judah. They're going to gather at the Mount of Olives and they're going to be weeping and sobbing over their Messiah. They're going to look upon him whom they have pierced. So Rachel gets married last, just like the kingdom of Judah gets married to our Messiah last. But you see, the ones that are taken up to heaven and they are going to be given a new resurrected body, a glorified body, an incorruptible, immortal body, they're the ones that typify Leah. They're the ones that typify Philadelphia because they have the open door that no man can shut. You see, those that get caught up on the Feast of Trumpets, they typify the wise virgins. The wise virgins, okay? They get to go in first. I'm going to show you a graphic I made because a lot of people are really kind of confused about this. Let's compare the parable of the virgins with Noah's Ark. So many people are confused. They confuse the parable of those who are taken and those who are left with the parable of the wheat and the tares. It says in the parable of the wheat and the tares that first the wicked people are gathered, just like the wicked tares, and they are burned. But then the wheat is gathered into barns. And so people assume that means that the wicked people are taken off of the earth. No, they're not. Okay. The wicked are gathered first to the great supper. It says this in Revelation 19. The wicked are gathered first to the great supper where they shall be eaten by the birds, and then they shall be cast alive into the lake of fire. That's in Revelation 19:17 through 20. The bride is then gathered after that to where? The marriage supper of the Lamb, which will take place on the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot, down here on earth. You see, in an ancient Hebrew wedding, this is important. People need to understand the way they did things in an ancient Hebrew wedding is that the bridegroom would come in the middle of the night at midnight when everybody else was asleep, and he would snatch the bride away. He would whisk her off and they would elope. They would elope. Okay. And
I'm sure the parents, woke up and sent them on their way together.
Right. It was already planned, but this is how they did it. And they would go away. And where would they go? Well, see, the bride and the groom would get engaged. They would be betrothed. Oftentimes the families planned their betrothal when they were still children. When your daughter grows up, I want my son to marry your daughter. So it was usually a prearranged marriage. And then they would sign a ketubah, and then the bridegroom would go away and he would prepare a place for her. He would build a honeymoon suite on his father's estate. And this is what is meant in John chapter 14 when Messiah said, I go and prepare a place for you, that where I am, you shall be also. In my father's house are many mansions. Okay, so this is what they did. The bridegroom would go away and prepare a place, a honeymoon suite, and then he would come. And she didn't know the exact day or the hour, but she knew the approximate time and season of his coming. Okay. Then, after they spent 7 days in the huppah, the wedding huppah, then they would go back to the bride's family's house and they would celebrate for yet another 7 days with all the guests, the friends, and the family. And they would have a 7-day long celebration, just like the wedding at Cana, right? So this ancient Hebrew wedding custom perfectly aligns with the fall feasts, because you see, between the Feast of Trumpets and the Day of Atonement or Yom Kippur, you have 10 days, but is sandwiched inside the 10 days are 7 days. Then after Yom Kippur, you have another 7 days of the Feast of Tabernacles. Okay, so the 5 foolish virgins have been left out of the wedding huppah, while the 5 wise virgins have been taken into the wedding huppah. See, now some people say, oh, it's the wicked people that get taken. Well, I'm going to disprove that. Okay, and it says in Matthew 25:10, and the door was shut. Soon as the wise virgins go in to the wedding, the door is shut. Now, where does the bridegroom take the bride for a 7-day honeymoon? As I already said, in my Father's house are many mansions. I go to prepare a place for you. This is obviously heaven. Yahushua is going to take the bride to his Father's house, which is in heaven. Now, how long is a traditional Hebrew wedding? Jacob and Leah's honeymoon lasted for 7 days. Genesis 29:27 through 28. Samson's wedding feast lasted for 7 days. That's in Judges 4:12 and 4:17. Noah's family were taken into the ark, and the ark was taken up from the earth, and the wicked people were left out of the ark and down here on earth to drown. And guess what? The door was shut. Genesis 7:16. You see, as soon as Yahuwah put Noah and his family in the ark, it says he shut the door and they were in the ark for 7 days before the rain began to fall. So there was a 7-day waiting period. So that correlates to the 7 days that we, the bride, are taken up to heaven for 7 days.
Yeah, people really just need to recalibrate. When scripture talks about taken, it's not like you're kidnapped. It's wedding language, it's covenant language.
Exactly. So Noah's family were taken into the ark, and the ark was taken up from the earth. The wicked people were left out of the ark. They were left here to drown. They weren't taken somewhere.
And the Christian church should know this. I mean, they're famous for having books and movies and stuff, the Left Behind series. They were left. So they understand that being left isn't good.
No, I know, but I'm talking about like Hebrew roots people. They think they're so much smarter than Christians because they think they've arrived. Oh, we've arrived. So now what do? They overcorrect.
I agree. Yeah.
They overcorrect. They throw out the proverbial baby with the bathwater and they say, oh, there's no rapture. And you see people all over Facebook, there's no rapture. There's no rapture. They think they know it all. No. They've thrown out the baby with the bathwater. There is a harpazo. There is a catching away of the bride. It's just that it's post-tribulation, not pre-tribulation. And it says the wicked people were left out of the ark. The door was shut. Genesis 7:16. Noah's family were inside the ark for 7 days before the rain began to fall. We read about that in Genesis 5:31 Genesis 7:4 and Genesis 7:10. See, the congregation at Philadelphia are taken into the wedding huppah because they have an open door that no man can shut. Revelation 3:8. The congregation at Smyrna must suffer tribulation for 10 more days until Yom Kippur. That's Revelation 2:10. You see, there are 10 days from the Feast of Trumpets until Yom Kippur. The two witnesses are dead for 3 days before they are taken up to heaven in the wedding huppah for 7 days. So when you add 3 days plus 7 days, what do you get? 10 days. So from the time that the two witnesses are killed until the two witnesses are taken up to heaven and celebrate the 7-day honeymoon with Messiah, and then they return back to earth with him riding on white horses, that's a total of 10 days. See? Are these foolish virgins? Do they look like they're being taken somewhere? No. These foolish virgins are left out. That's why they are knocking on the door saying, we missed it. We went to buy oil, and while we bought the oil, we missed the wedding. Well, they represent Smyrna. See, Smyrna, they represent the Jewish people, the Yahudim, the Jews that didn't accept Messiah before the rapture or harpazo. Now, there's going to be plenty of Messianic Jews that accept him, and they were going to be caught up together with the Gentiles in the rapture, the harpazo. But the ones that didn't accept Messiah yet, they're going to be left out. They're the wise, they're virgins, but they're foolish virgins because they don't have the oil of his name. Song of Solomon 1:3 tells us what the oil represents. It says, your name is like oil poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love you. So it's the oil of his name. And we know that the Yahudim, the Jewish people, don't pronounce his name. They call him Hashem because they say it's too holy to pronounce. But see, that's not biblical. Yahuwah wants us to call him by a name. That's why he says, he that calls upon the name shall be saved. Okay? Now, these people that are standing outside the door of Noah's Ark, do they look like they're being taken somewhere? No. They're outside. They're being left out of the ark to die in the flood. They weren't taken somewhere. Okay, so it's ridiculous when people misinterpret these verses to mean that the wicked people get taken somewhere. No, they're gathered to the battle of Armageddon. That is true. Okay, we know that's true because I'll show it to you right here.
So just to clarify for some people, there's this idea of a 7-year tribulation, which is not really accurate from a 7-year linear timeline. There is a 7-year period where the first 3.5 years effectively was Messiah's ministry.
Exactly.
It's sort of him revealing himself, right? So you have the world going on as it is, and then Yahuwah steps into the world incarnate and basically says, look, I'm gonna straighten and clarify some things.
Right.
And then at the end of that period, those who choose to walk with me, we're now engaged, and I'm going away to prepare a place. So, he dies and he says, I'm going away to prepare a place.
Right.
That's the fullness of the Gentiles. That's the time where the rest of the world is sort of catching up over the 2,000 years for the gospel. It's a pause, if you will. And then when the abomination that causes desolation occurs, that's the kickoff of we're starting the count again.
Right.
So it's the rest of the 7 years, the 7-year period, which is now only 3.5 years left, starts. And we're all going to go through hard times. We're all going to be tested. The reason we know, it says, pray that your fleeing won't be on the Sabbath, that it won't be in winter time.
That's right.
The adversary is going to try to swallow the woman up with a flood. We're all going to go through hard times. It's not that we've been good, so we're excused, right? This is the refiner's fire. It's not just a song that we sing. Well, to be holy and set apart, it's just like special forces. You can all go into the military. Not everyone is going to pass the test and be worthy of being a Navy SEAL or a Green Beret or an Army Ranger, right? You have to be tested, and some will fail. All of mankind will be tested, and those who pass the test are the ones who stayed faithful until the end of tribulation, 10 days before the end.
Right.
When we are repturo, I can't roll my tongue.
Yeah.
Repturo, and we go away for 7 days within a 10-day period. And then he comes back with this bride on white horses and touches down on the Mount of Olives. Those who have persecuted Messiah will recognize what they've done, and they'll weep, and they'll repent, and they'll accept at that moment. Now, I'm not going to get into whether or not they're going to be changed in a twinkling of an eye, or whether they're going to remain in the flesh for the 1,000 years, but it's right after they come back at the Mount of Olives that there's a butt kicking that's going to happen with Messiah and the bride.
Yeah, we're not going to kick butt to the Jewish people that are
I
weeping
mean,
and
to those who have been persecuting the world for 3.5 years.
Right.
And, Armageddon and all that.
Right.
Okay.
So right here, there's people now that are saying, oh, we're already in the Great Tribulation. No, we're not. Our Messiah says, when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso reads, let him understand. And then a few verses down, what does he say? For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. See, we have to be able to see the abomination of desolation. Now, I know some people have said, oh, it's the jabs. The jabs, they're the abomination that causes desolation. Well, I'm one of the first ones that even recognized that concept back in 2020. I made a meme because there's a repeat in history, right? There was an abomination of desolation at the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. He desecrated the temple. And of course, he set up an image of Zeus on the altar, and he sacrificed a pig and, sprinkled the pig's blood, defiled the temple with pig's blood. It says in 167, I wrote, in 167 BCE, the troops of the Greek Antiochus Epiphanes, the fourth, desolated the temple and did away with the daily sacrifices on Kislev 25, which is December 25th in 167 BC. And, that's what Christmas is. People don't understand. Christmas is an egregious thing to our Creator because they offered up babies on the altar to Moloch on that day. They considered that day a high day, and they still consider it a high holy day in Satanism. Okay. And so Antiochus set up an image of Zeus on the altar, resembling himself. He claimed that he was the reincarnation of Zeus. He claimed he was, gave himself the title Epiphania. Epiphania means God manifest, or it means God with us. Just like Emmanuel, the name Emmanuel means God with us, Elohim with us. Well, he claimed to be the El with us. In Greek, it's Epiphania, but it adds up to 666. This word Epiphania, it has a numerical value of 666 in Greek. So that was the first fulfillment. Then there was another fulfillment of the abomination that causes desolation. This is in the year 70, the Common Era. The troops of the Roman general Titus desolated the temple, and they did away with the daily sacrifices on the 9th of Av, 70, the Common Era. Then they set up the Roman eagle standards, as well as a graven image of Nero Caesar, he also claimed he was a reincarnation of Zeus or Jupiter. The Romans called him Jupiter, but the Greeks called him Zeus, but they're the same deity. Okay, but Jupiter is the Roman name and Zeus is the Greek name. But they did the same thing on December 25th. Nero Caesar, his name in Hebrew and also in Roman, adds up to 666. And they put Nero's face on the temple coin. So you got two parallels here. One was in 167 BC, the other was in 70 AD. And now what do we have in 2020? We have Trump saying that he's going to form an alliance, the Abraham Accords, with three nations: Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and Israel. But here's the caveat. They all had to agree to take this snake bite. They had to agree to the snake bite. That was part of the deal. Okay? So we're going to see how accurate this is to the little horn in Daniel's prophecy. But let's take a look at what's in these snake bites: monkey kidney cells, pig gelatin, pig arginine, DNA from pigs, canine, dog kidney cells, and DNA. And we are told that these things are unclean. Leviticus 11 tells us these things are unclean, that it's an abomination to eat these things. So you see, these things are an abomination to the human body. Okay? I have to be careful with the words I use, or otherwise YouTube tries to flag me, takes down my video. So I have to use code language. Okay? So the thing is, just because there's this abomination to the human body does not mean that there's not going to be a literal temple, because we have to be able to see it. You know, what are we supposed to do? Walk around with stethoscopes, examining everybody's bodies to be able to see the abomination inside of everybody's bodies? No, that makes absolutely no sense. What are you going to do? Line everybody up and say, come get your MRI, come get your X-ray so we can see the abomination inside of your body? No, that doesn't make any sense. Everyone's going to see it. I believe there's going to be giant television screens everywhere, even probably holograms, like, Project Bluebeam. There's probably going to be holograms where everybody's going to be able to see. We were just talking to some friends of ours yesterday, and she says you can take a tour, a virtual reality tour of the temple right now, right?
I wasn't here for the whole conversation.
So it's a hologram. So I believe everyone's going to be able to see it.
Not to mention news. I mean, you get 24/7 news. You can turn on any channel, any radio station, any streaming website, and with just a few keywords, you can find anything that happened, unless they decide to block it out. But if it's a big enough deal, nobody's going to block it out because they don't want to be the website that's not covering it. If you have a billion eyes looking up an event, no one wants to be the website that says, well, we don't want to give attention to this, so we're going to be the one website that doesn't get the clicks, and our advertisers are not going to get the clicks because we're not going to talk about the disappearance of a third of the world's population or, whatever.
We're going to wrap this up any minute here, but I wanted to say that those that missed part 1, the point of all of this is when Messiah said, except those days should be shortened, I decided to look into what that means. And we covered it last week, and I know that many of you missed it, but I looked up the word for shortened, and this is what it means in the Greek. It means a dock, a pier. Now, look at that. The dock, it's like a partition that divides a body of water. Now, when I saw that, I looked up the word for shortened, and it's this Greek word kalobu, and it means to dock, to abridge, to shorten.
Or to separate, to be an in the middle of two halves.
Right, and it comes from another root word, kolazo, which means to curtail, okay, to punish. Well, you see, I was shocked when I saw this because I looked up the word in the dictionary, dock. It's a noun, a landing pier, the space or waterway between two piers, okay, or wharves, as for receiving a ship while in port. Now, the verb used with an object means to bring a ship or a boat into a dock, to lay up in a dock, to place in dry dock for repairs. Okay, so the definition for the word dock tells us there's a gap between two borders or two seashores, two edges. In other words, it is describing something that is divided in the middle. It can mean a partition that places a bridge in the middle of the water. But this reminded me of what it says in Daniel 12. In Daniel chapter 12, Daniel is asking how long the tribulation is going to last for, right? And it says, but you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood other two, the one on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on that side of the bank of the river. You see, two men, each on one side of the banks of the river. But one man, the third man, is standing in the middle, standing in the gap. So you see, there's an image of a man with two of his arms up in the air, right hand and left hand, and then two men or angels or messengers on each side of the bank of the river. Okay. And what does he say? He says, and one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? Daniel 12:7 says, and I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swore by him that lives forever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half, and when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. Now, what does the right hand and the left hand represent? Well, you see, Ezekiel the prophet was told to lie on his left side for the kingdom of Israel or Ephraim for their sins. Okay. And then he was told to lay on his right side for the sins of Judah. So the right hand represents the kingdom of Judah. The left hand represents the northern kingdom of the 10 lost tribes of Ephraim. So you see, the man who was standing in the middle of the riverbank represents Messiah, who swore with his right hand and his left hand, meaning that he's sworn to redeem both houses of Israel. Now, why is that significant? Because, see, the word swore in Hebrew means to take an oath 7 times. Here's the word, shabah, okay? The word for swear, it means to seven oneself, to swear as if by repeating a declaration 7 times, by an oath, with an oath. Now remember, in Psalms 110, Yahuwah has sworn and will not repent. He says, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So, in other words, he swore that he would redeem the two houses, the left and the right side. The left side meaning the 10 tribes, and the right side meaning the 2 southern tribes of Judah. He swore that he would redeem both houses. So you see, this is what is meant by that he would shorten the days. But there's so much more to this, but I'm out of time. But we're going to finish next week. Now, I want to talk about this real quick. I think it ties into what we're talking about, because I posted this the other day. Okay, I made this meme. As you can see, both camps are out of balance. Most of Christianity teaches a pre-tribulation rapture. In Greek, it's called harpazo. Most of Hebraic roots teaches no rapture at all. You see, both camps are wrong. Scripture teaches a post-tribulation harpazo, a catching away of the bride. Okay, now this is what I wrote to go along with this. I said, now that many of you within the Hebraic community have come out of the erroneous pre-trib rapture doctrine, you are throwing away the proverbial baby with the bathwater by teaching that there is no harpazo or catching away of the bride at all. You see, but it can be proven from the whole counsel of Scripture that in an ancient Hebrew wedding, the bride and groom eloped at midnight in secret when everyone was asleep. See Matthew 25:6. This is why in 1 Corinthians 15:51, Paul calls it a secret. He calls it a mystery. Okay? Because the bridegroom came in secret. Only he knew when he was coming. That's why the Feast of Trumpets is nicknamed the day that no man knows. It's not that he didn't know. It's just that they nicknamed it that because the Feast of Trumpets is the only feast that can only be determined by the visible sighting of the first sliver of the new moon. And when the watchmen on the wall saw that first sliver, they would announce to the Sanhedrin, the court of the elders, that it was a new month, and they would send out couriers to the other tribes and let them know it's a new month. Okay. So it was the day that no man knows. In other words, nobody knows exactly when the Feast of Trumpets is going to begin until Yahuwah decides, until he lets the sliver of the new moon appear. Because sometimes there could be a dark moon for 2 nights in a row, sometimes even 3 nights in a row. And sometimes there's cloud coverage and you can't sight the moon. But it was dependent on eyewitnesses. And we know this because it says it in Deuteronomy 16:1. For those that doubt me, it says right here, observe the month Abib and keep the Pesach unto Yahuwah your Elohim. For in the month Abib, Yahuwah your Elohim brought you forth out of Mitzrayim or Egypt by night. Well, this word observe is shamar, and it means to watch narrowly, to be a watchman. So we're to watch the month, watch for the new moon. This word month is Kodesh, and it means new moon. We are commanded to watch for the new moon in the first month of the year because, see, the first new moon of the year is going to determine for the remaining months when the festivals are going to be. So that first new moon is pivotal. Okay. So the bride or the corporate 2 witnesses will be caught up to heaven and to the throne of Elohim after 1,260 days. But this is post-tribulation. This is not pre-tribulation. The Greek word for caught up is harpazo. The same word in Italian is rapturo, which has the very same meaning: to seize, to snatch away, to take by force, to take unto oneself in an intimate way, to take into marriage. The Hebrew word for when the prophet Eliyahu or Elijah was caught up to heaven in a chariot of fire is lahach. And it also means the very same thing as the Greek harpazo. And it means the same thing as the Italian rapturo. So yes, the concept is there. Even though the word rapture is not in our English Bible, the concept is there. There will be a post-tribulation harpazo, or catching away of the bride, to the throne in heaven on the Feast of Trumpets. But the bride's only going to be in the heavenly huppah for 7 literal days, just like Jacob and Leah's honeymoon. And you can see that in Genesis 29:27 through 28. Now, after 7 days in the heavenly huppah, the bride returns to earth with Messiah, riding on white horses as his army, ready to fight in a war with him on Yom Kippur. Now, some people say, oh, no, it says in Deuteronomy 24:5 that, when a man takes a wife, he must not go to war for the first year of his marriage. That's true, but this situation is different because he's not leaving his bride behind. He's actually fighting together with her. He's not going away and leaving her behind.
Yeah, and there's extra reasons too. I mean, not everything in an analogy is exact when we're looking at the human experience versus the heavenly experience. In the human experience, as my wife already talked about, if her husband dies and she has no children, she has no retirement. She has nothing. In the earthly realm, that's a concern. When Messiah comes back, like you said, he's not leaving his bride behind. there's no concern that he's going to be killed in war,
Exactly.
right? He's immortal.
Exactly.
He's Elohim.
And the
And the bride's
immortal.
immortal at this point.
Yeah, we've put on immortality.
So at some levels, the analogies aren't a one-for-one.
So here is scriptural proof that the corporate two witnesses, aka the 144,000, the bride, are going to be caught up to heaven for a 7-day honeymoon before returning to earth on Yom Kippur. Is there a pattern in scripture for a 7-day honeymoon? Yes, there is. I've already explained and showed you the meme I made. In Genesis 29, 27 through 28, Jacob and Leah had a literal week, 7 days of consummating their marriage. In Judges 14, 12 through 17, Samson's wedding feast lasted for 7 days. Is there a pattern in scripture for the bride being taken to heaven for a 7-day honeymoon? Yes. In John 14, 2, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. In John 14, 3, he says, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there shall you be also. Where has the bride been? That she is now returning with Messiah as his army on white horses. Revelation 19:7 says, let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife has made herself ready. Verse 8, Revelation 19:8, and to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white. For the fine linen is the righteousness of the Kodeshim, saints. Revelation 19:9, and he said unto me, right, blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said unto me, these are the true words of Elohim. See, they're coming back to earth to celebrate the marriage supper of the Lamb, which is going to take place not in the New Jerusalem, but the earthly Jerusalem during the Feast of Tabernacles. Okay. They've already had their 7-day honeymoon in heaven. Now they're coming back for the other 7 days with the guests. Okay. Revelation 19:11 says, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he does judge and make war. Now, this is a pivotal verse right here. Revelation 19:14 says, and the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. Because some people say, oh, it's just the angels that are coming back with him. No, the armies that were in heaven are the bride. We just got done reading that the bride is clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And now the armies which were in heaven are clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And we just got done reading that the fine linen represents the righteousness of the saints. So how do we know that the army is the bride, aka the whole house of Israel, and not just the Malachim or the angels? Well, here we go. Ezekiel 37:9 says, then he said unto me, prophesy unto the wind, prophesy, son of Adam, and say to the wind, thus says Adonai Yahuwah, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain, that they may live. Ezekiel 37:10 says, so I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived and stood upon their feet, an exceeding great army. Verse 11, Ezekiel 37:11. Then he said unto me, son of Adam, these bones are the whole house of Israel. It doesn't say the army is angels.
Yeah, not the Melachim of Israel.
No, they are flesh and bone. Okay? And it says, behold, they say, our bones are dried and our hope is lost. We are cut off for our parts. Ezekiel 37:12 says, therefore prophesy and say unto them, thus says Adonai Yahuwah, behold, O my people, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of your graves and bring you into the land of Israel. See, first they go to heaven for the honeymoon, and then they come back to the land to have the Feast of Tabernacles, the marriage supper. Okay. Now, do you need further proof that the bride is his army? Let's look at Proverbs 31. The Proverbs 31 wife is a prophetic picture of the bride of Messiah. Proverbs 31:10 says, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies." Well, in Hebrew, the word virtuous means an army. That's what it literally means, an army. Okay? So Proverbs 31:10 is basically saying, who can find a powerful woman? Okay, Dr. Frank Seekins discusses this. He's got a YouTube video about it. A virtuous woman means a powerful woman, a woman who is capable, okay, to be a helpmeet to her husband.
He uses the term a powerful military ally.
Right, exactly.
You have each other's back. You might have different strengths, but together you are a force.
Exactly. In Genesis 2:18, the word helpmeet literally means a military front. That's exactly what a helpmeet is. Additional proof that the 7-day honeymoon takes place in heaven. In Malachi 4:2, it's prophetically Messiah is called the Son of Righteousness, S-U-N. It's the Shemesh Zadek, the Son of Righteousness. And the Son has been placed inside of a heavenly tabernacle. In Psalm 19:4-5, it says, "In them he has set a tabernacle for the Son, which is as the bridegroom coming out of his chamber." Well, guess what? That word chamber in Hebrew is huppah, a wedding huppah. Okay, so the Son inside the, I know flat earthers think that the firmament is this tiny little area surrounding the earth that's trapped inside of a glass dome. No, the firmament is the expanse, the entire what we would call outer space.
The universe.
Yeah, that is the firmament. When Yahuwah separated the waters in heaven from the waters down here on earth, what does it say in Revelation? There's a river of life flowing from the throne in heaven. There's that water in the third heaven, right? And then there's the water down on earth. And between those two bodies of water, there's a huge expanse called the rakia in Hebrew, called the firmament. There's a big gap. There's a big space between the water down here on earth and the water in heaven, the river of life.
And doesn't the word firmament also, you were just looking this up recently, something to the effect of without end? It's like it's borderless.
Well,
it's
yeah, exactly. It has no borders. Yeah. I mean, I'll look it up right now. I mean,
in a solar system or each galaxy, galaxies have borders. I mean, one galaxy doesn't cave into another galaxy. There's a separation, which means there's borders, even if it's not a line on a map. But the universe holds everything, even other dimensions, and it's without end.
Right. So the word firmament, rakia, says an expanse. That is the firmament, visible arch of the sky, the firmament. Now, so if they see the word arch of the sky, they think that means that there's a glass dome.
Oh, like a dome.
Yeah, that's what they think it means. But no, it's what we would call outer space. That's the visible arch of the sky. And in fact, I even have a meme. I went over this in another podcast, so I know that this is probably redundant for some of you, but the visible arch of the sky is what we would call the first heaven, Earth's atmosphere. It's not made out of glass. It's just, particles and it's air.
It's gases held around the globe by the very gravity of the globe.
Right. So there's three heavens. First, 2 Corinthians 12:2 talks about the third heaven. Paul, the apostle Shaul, said that he was caught up to the third heaven, or he knew a man that was caught up to the third heaven. This is the third heaven, which, is often probably some distant galaxy, or it's probably in a different dimension. But the first heaven is this area between Earth's surface and the atmosphere. That's the first heaven. The second heaven is what we call outer space. It's the expanse.
The universe.
It's the firmament. Okay. And then right here we find that And Revelation 7:17, for the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them and shall lead them unto living fountains of waters, and Elohim shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. See, right here in 2 Peter 3:5, it talks about the pre-flood earth. And it says that, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water. So there was a canopy, a water canopy that surrounded the earth before the flood. But it says in 2 Peter 3:6, whereby the world that then was being overflowed with water perished. So whatever water canopy was there is perished during the flood. It's gone. Okay. So there's no more canopy covering the earth. Okay. So that's a fallacy. But you see, after the bride and groom celebrate their honeymoon in heaven for 7 literal days, they return to earth for yet another 7 days to celebrate with friends and family at the marriage supper of the Lamb during Sukkot. This was customary in ancient Hebrew weddings. The bride and groom eloped for 7 days and then returned to the bride's family's home to celebrate with the guests for yet another 7 days. So 7 days plus 7 days equals 14 days. These 14 days correlate to Jacob's 2 weddings, working 14 years for both of his brides. In other words, symbolizing both houses of Israel. That's the end of the teaching for today. I'm not going to hold you guys up any longer. I'd love to hear from you. Questions, all questions are welcome. Please feel free to open your mics and ask questions at this time.
Do you have a graphic, a timeline to kind of show the 7 years where there's the ministry of Messiah, the gap of the Gentiles, the abomination that causes desolation, kicking off tribulation? Right now we're in the birthing pains that start, before tribulation, and then when the woman runs away and is sort of hidden during tribulation. That doesn't mean she's hidden from any difficulties, but she's provided for during that time. It's still going to be a scary time.
Okay, Jubilee. I've got a blog on the Jubilee cycles, and I put together like a graph here. So basically, I
Perfect.
studied the birthday of Messiah from like back in 2002, right after 9/11. And I read this book by Dr. Ernest L. Martin called The Star That Astonished the World. And it was just a fascinating book. And it explains when Messiah was born, that he was born on the Feast of Trumpets. The constellations that were visible that night was from Revelation 12. You can see Betula is how you say virgin in Hebrew. The constellation of Betula, the virgin. And then she was giving birth to Ariel, which means Lion of El. And the sliver of the moon was under her feet that night. And this is recorded in, the chronicles of all the constellations. And she had a crown of 12 stars. But inside of the lion was 2 planets that were aligning. Jupiter, which the ancient Hebrews called Jupiter Hazadik, which means the righteous. And the planet Venus was called the king, Hamalek. So Venus and Jupiter were in conjunction, and that means the king of righteousness. In other words, Melchizedek. So you have the virgin giving birth to the Lion of Judah, who is Melchizedek. And this was on the Feast of Trumpets because it was a brand new moon. The first sliver was visible the night he was born. And so going by this, we have Messiah being born in 4 BC. Now I've got the Julian calendar year, the Gregorian calendar year, the Hebrew or the Jewish year. Okay, so the Jewish year, there's 250 years approximately missing because they start counting after the flood. But the Hebrew year starts right from the very beginning of creation, right? So how did I calculate this? I calculated this based on the Jubilee cycles because, like I said, it was Josephus, who was a Jewish historian, who said in his Antiquities that 23 BC was a Jubilee year. It was the 79th Jubilee. So based on his testimony, I put together this chart, And so what I came to is that in 27 AD, on the Feast of Trumpets, was the year 4000. So he began his ministry exactly in the year 4000. He turned 30 years old while he was in the wilderness fasting and praying. He had to turn 30 years old while he was fasting in the wilderness, because that's the only way he would have been eligible to preach the acceptable year 10 days later, when he emerged out of the 40-day fast and went to the synagogue. He had to already be 30 years old, because according to Numbers 4:3 through 47, a priest has to be 30 years old. If he had not turned 30 years old on the Feast of Trumpets that year, he would not have qualified to preach the acceptable year that year on Yom Kippur. So that's one proof that he had to have been born on the Feast of Trumpets. Okay, so it was 27 AD. Okay, but according to the Hebrew year, it was the year 4000. Okay, and then he had a ministry that lasted for 3 years. So I've got 27 AD, Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, 27 AD, that would be 10 days later. Day of Atonement, 28 AD, that was a year later. Day of Atonement, 29 AD, that's 2 years later. Day of Atonement, 30 AD, that's 3 years later. And then finally, Passover, 31 AD. So it was exactly 3.5 years. He was 33.5 years old when he died. So from creation until the 40th Jubilee is when Abraham was born. So there's 2,000 years from creation to Abraham. And then Noah died. Then there's 500 more years. The 50th Jubilee would be the Exodus, when Israel came out of Egypt. Then there's 500 years. The 60th Jubilee is when the temple was complete. Add 500 years, you come to the 70th Jubilee. This would be the decree that King Artaxerxes, well, first it was Cyrus who gave the verbal decree, but then it was King Artaxerxes who enforced Cyrus's decree. That was in the 70th Jubilee. Then you add 500 more years, you come to the 80th Jubilee, which is when Messiah's first coming was. Now you had 2,000 years, which is 40 more Jubilees. That takes us to the 120th Jubilee, which is 6,000 years. That's going to be in the year 2027.
And of course, that synchronizes with the word that says, I will strive with man 120.
Right here in Genesis chapter 6, it says, you find it here, he says, I will not always strive with man. And Yahuwah said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. But see, this word years is the Hebrew word shana, and it is not just limited to, an annual, a regular 360-day year. It can also mean an age, a revolution of time. So some theologians have postulated that this is 120 jubilees, which makes sense, because if you were to take 120 times 50, that brings us to 6,000 years, which is the beginning of the 7th millennium.
Which means you're going into a Sabbath, which means the millennium will be a millennium of Sabbath rest, which we know because Hasatan will be locked up and imprisoned, and there will be no lying and war during that 1,000-year Sabbath, right?
So if what Josephus said is correct, and I have no reason to doubt that what he said was correct, we should probably be expecting Messiah to return sometime between the year 27 and 28 AD. That year would be a Jubilee. Now, the reason I say anywhere in that year 27 to 28, I'm not sure if it's going to be Yom Kippur 2027 or Yom Kippur 2028, because the Romans have tampered with the calendar. The Gregorian calendar removed 11 days from the calendar. And when Pope Gregory made his changes, a lot of previous dates were changed to the previous year. And they had this thing going for a while called double dating, where they would put, like in different textbooks or history books, they would have 2 dates. Like they would say, This is why, what's his name? The guy that wrote the book, The Star That Astonished the World, Dr. Ernest Martin, when he wrote in his book that Messiah was born in 4/3 BC. I always was confused. Well, why does he say 4/3 BC? Because we don't know, because of Pope Gregory's, corruption to the calendar. It's, there's a 1 year differential.
Right. Not to mention you got the Julian and the Gregorian.
Right. But I tend to think it's probably going to be in the year 2028. And the reason I believe there's a strong possibility that he will return. I'm not setting dates. I'm only postulating here. Okay.
Scripture does tell us to calculate.
Yeah.
So when it says calculate, it means look at the evidence and try to figure it out.
So Yahushua said, now learn the parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, you know that summer is near. Okay. And then he goes on to verse 33 and he says, so likewise, when you shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. And then he says, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Well, when Israel became a nation again was 1948. And now if we go to Psalms 90, verse 10. For the days of our years are 60 years and 10. So that's 70. 60 is 60. 10 is 60 plus 10. That's 70 years. And if by reason of strength they be 80 years, that's 80 years, yet is their strength labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off and we fly away. Fly away. Okay, so people say there's no such thing as a quote unquote rapture, harpazo. Right there, it says fly away. Okay. Our body stays in the grave, but our spirit goes back to Elohim who gave it. It says this plainly in Ecclesiastes 12:7.
And why would they just not say flee, right? They use the term flee in other places, and it would be more consistent if it just meant flee.
Right. Yeah. It says to fly away with wings. Our spirit goes back to Elohim when we die. People talk about soul sleep. No, there's no such thing as soul sleep. Yes, the body is in the grave and it looks like we're sleeping. The word sleep, when the scripture talks about sleeping, it's more of a metaphor because a person looks like they're sleeping. But no, our body is going to be in the grave, but our spirit goes back to Elohim who gave it. But that's for another teaching. So I believe based on this, Israel became a nation in 1948. If we add 80 years, which is the length of a generation, right, to 1948, we come to 2028. So I feel like it's possible, entirely possible, that Yahushua could come back by Yom Kippur 2028. But I'm not setting dates. I'm just postulating.
Right. And there's all the end time prophecies that have to be fulfilled in that time in their place. But as we have seen, things that are manifesting in our world are manifesting at an ever-increasing rate. Goals and agendas are being implemented at an ever-increasing rate. So is it possible that that can all come to fruition in that time? Yep. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Yahuwah bless you and keep you. Yahuwah make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon you and give you Shalom. We hope you've enjoyed today's broadcast and that you are encouraged in your walk with Messiah. For more teachings, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell to be notified of our latest content. Visit Maria's many blogs at doubleportioninheritance.com. That's doubleportioninheritance.com. This ministry is made possible by the prayers and support of listeners like you. To make a donation by PayPal or Venmo.com, use the email address doubleportioninheritance@gmail.com. That's doubleportioninheritance@gmail.com. On behalf of Maria and Gary at Double Portion Inheritance Ministries, may Yahuwah bless you.